All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the assembly bay of the Aurora Space Program. Here we are. We're about to go over all of the crafts that we saw in the 1958 episode of Aurora Space Program. I will be skipping the Tayan 5 alternate that was launched on top of the Ahote 600 booster at the beginning of the episode because, well, it was really just a carbon copy of the TN5 that we did launch, and it was the backup in case that launch did fail. So thankfully, it did not fail. Thankfully, we were able to get the light satellites done, and we picked up some new contracts in the last episode, and I don't know if I went over them quite yet. The first contracts were going to be the the commercial applications, the early commercial applications, and the early Earth observation satellites. So those are going to be our two programs going forward. I also picked up uncrewed lunar exploration as well, those early lunar probes, though that may or may not be worked on for a while. We'll just have to see. I'm going to bring back a little bit of the scriptedness in the next episode of Aurora Space Program. That's going to be 1959, and we'll see how you'll like that. But I'll come right back to you once I have our first craft, and it's going to be the X4. All right, welcome back. Here we are. As we saw at the very beginning of the episode, this is the X4, that plane that we saw in the opening crawl of the 1958 episode. This plane, in theory, is derived from the X3 and the first three X planes that we had, but only in central core fuselage structure. I ripped off the wings of the earlier X planes and replaced those. I left the drag fins, the control surfaces, you could see our air brakes. I left those on, and I left the wheel placement pretty much the same. I replaced the cockpit, obviously. Let's see, what else have I done? Not much really. I think I extended the engine bay back here, and there is a little bit of clipping, but I'm sure I can be forgiven for that. I'm doing my best with these XLR-25s. They're very tall engines and not very wide. But this plane is a logical derivative of the X3, something that comes afterwards. For this plane, what I primarily wanted was a plane that could crest the 100-kilometer mark and take us past the Kármán line. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be able to go past 140 kilometers, so I just kept the fuselage shorter and used up most of it with fuel as much as I could. Um, Unfortunately, these XLR-25s take a high pressure fuel, and we could only utilize 84% of our fuel tank, which is a bit of a shame. And I think I do have a new fuselage now, stringer tanks, yes, but at the time of this construction, I did not, and that's a bit of a shame. This plane utilizes drop tanks as well, something that I've come to rely pretty heavily on, as there's no way that I have enough fuel in these fuselages to be able to actually fly up to the desired altitude. And the bad part, I guess, about that is, let's go back to this and I'll fill it with the XLR-25. The bad part about that is it's really difficult, I guess, to fill a plane up enough and balance the drag from the wing surfaces, but you also need the wing surfaces to be powerful enough to actually generate lift for the plane when it's coming down in for its landing. So the way that I could do that, the way that I could add more fuel to the plane without having to alter the fuselage structure, all that much was to add these little drop tanks, and that's something that I started doing, I think, all the way back on the X2. But one thing that's really different about these drop tanks is I included these two little Sepratron motors in each of them. Something that you'll notice if you ever are flying planes really fast in this game is that there's something of an aerodynamic effect that sucks parts back into your craft, and they can eventually, the nose at least, can eventually hit your craft. And while you may be going fast and you may think that the ejection force from the decoupler is enough to actually push this piece of metal away from your plane, I can tell you that in testing, it was much, much, much more unpredictable. These tanks would sometimes fly off normally, and sometimes they would be sucked right back on, hit this center fuselage structure, and destroy the entire plane. So, in order to deal with that, I created these little Sepratron motors and I put them on our tanks, and they push the tanks away. And in the video, you probably have noticed it. You probably saw it in a couple of those flights of the X4. Um, when they flop off into the airstream, they tend to disassemble themselves. That's just because the pressures that we are experiencing as the plane is going that fast are just too much for these parts to stay together. But I think that's it for the X4. It is powered by two XLR 25s. I use that because back when the X15 was flying, the original X15 plane utilized two XLR 11 engines. And yeah, that seems fine, I guess, but I know that the XLR 25 is a little bit more powerful of an engine. Um, than the XLR 11, and I felt like putting in two XLR 11s on this thing didn't really make a ton of sense because it would just be trading. I would just be losing power when I could easily use two XLR 25s, and they fit a little bit more nicely with the shape of the plane. For control, I did add these two winglet attitude jets, and I added a long strip of control jets. 5 jets there and 5 on the bottom. That controls the pitching of the craft, and that's just to counteract the worst pitching effects of the. I guess there's a little decal there that I missed or something. Um, that would counteract the worst pitching effects of the XLR 25s. And I think in the last episode I went over this a little bit with the X3, but I managed to balance the XLR 25's rotational energy a little bit better in this plane, as you can see. I think that will be it for the X4. Very simple plane, just derived from a blend of high supersonic flight characteristics like small wings and short control surfaces, uh, and a blend of that with the previous X planes. And I created a little bit of a body shape wing because I thought it would look a little cooler, but it does generate a little bit of drag, and that probably does screw with our performance a little bit. We probably would have done better just to have these little wings attached directly to the side, but that wouldn't make quite a good looking craft, would it? All right, so I think that's it for the X4. I'm going to go ahead and come back to you once I have the TAN 5.5. All right, here we are back with the TAN 5.5. Very simple craft, I must admit. It was not extremely useful. It didn't have a lot of purpose in the program. And I must admit, it was something to just collect science for me in between the launch of our first um, Kuruk booster with the TAN 7 on board. And the previous launches of lighter satellites in the last couple years. Our Ahote 600 booster is really only capable of putting 50 kilograms into a 250-kilometer orbit, and so quickly this booster had become outdated, and for our uses, we would never have a need for such a small rocket again. But if I open this fairing, we can see our little TAN 5.5, which is this final piece on top of the stack. It's a little solid rocket motor, which is surrounded by a bunch of solar panels and the probe core at the very top. You can see it's got quite a bit of scientific analysis instruments on board. And the purpose of this craft is largely to fill out some of the data that I am missing for the Aurora Space Program as we waited for the TAN 7 to come online. And once again, very simple craft, and we can go here and it says perpetual. It does say none is consumed. In the last extras episode, some folks had commented, and I believe it is the avionics that consumes the majority of the power. Like, as you can see, let's see, what does it say? 25 watts for the avionics and 2 watts for the communications. Let's see what the comms here say. If we drop that down, let's say active transmission time at about 50%. Oh, 11 watts for communication. I wonder what it'd be if it's on 100%. So this is something that I will need to try to track going forward. Um, I do have episodes recorded up to 1961 at this point, but I need to make sure that I keep track of these little electrical panels here and making sure that I stay on top of things. Anyways, very simple probe, very simple. Not much to discuss here, and I think I'm going to move on to the next ship in the episode, and it's our last ship for this episode, and then I'll have a little bit of a discussion at the very end of where this series is about to be going. All right, and here we are back with the Kuruk 1 launching the TAN 7. So I think here I'm going to work backwards a little bit. I am going to start with the probe on the top, and I'm not going to start with the rocket that lifts it. So on the top here, we have the TAN stack. This is going to be the stack that makes it to orbit up here. This little bit up here is basically a TAN 5.5, a little bit shorter solar panels, and it's stacked on top of another engine. And this bit would be to get us the elliptical orbit that we require for the cosmic ray experiment. There's a contract within the early Earth observation satellites, I believe, that gives you a cosmic ray experiment. And so you can see we've got 2,500 meters per second of delta V. That's just about a 500 or so short of what you need to go to the moon. If I remove this top panel, and I did disable this antenna here. With the top panel off, we can look at this. We've just got the cosmic ray science and the video imaging on board. We don't necessarily need both, but it's just something that I had. And we've got a early lunar communotron antenna. We probably don't need more than 12 on this transmission power, and we probably wouldn't be using it quite as often. The avionics are being simulated, so you can see this is a bit of it's a satellite that's definitely going to run out of charge pretty soon, but it gave us quite a bit of charge, just enough for the experiment to be performed. and the data to be transmitted. A lot of the data had been gathered on the TN 5.5, um, and so it just needed to gather the little bit that was left over um, while within a certain orbital parameter. Um, so I think that's it for the probe. I'm going to just stick this on there. It's not going to look like it did before. And then we're going to go down to the vehicle. Let's take a look at the probe's weight first of all. So this is 0.373 tons. Um, and if I guess I could just remove the fuel from these. It says 7,000, but I know it's not 7,000. For the Tan 7 launch vehicle here, the Kuruk 1, we have a little bit of an issue. I had made a post, I believe, on Reddit a while back where I asked people how to solve this issue because on the previous Ahote boosters, um, our engines would never show the actual delta V. So let's look at the second stage of this booster. It uses 4 AJ10 series engines, and our third stage for this booster uses 1 AJ10 series engine. I could never figure out how to separate these stages because it constantly thinks that there is not a third stage here. It just thinks there is only this stage. And if I disable this decoupler, where is it? I guess not. I'm a fool. I must I must just be misremembering stuff. I'm not sure. Anyways, but in the past when I disabled this decoupler, it would then calculate the second tank's worth of delta V. But I don't know why now, like with the decoupler enabled, it doesn't. And it's a little confusing to me. We're going to go from the third stage first. This third stage is the last and final stage on the Tan one, or excuse me, the Kuruk 1 launch vehicle. It's capable of lifting 4 tons, including its own weight, and controlling that. And you can see the total stack with the Tan 7 on board is 3.95 tons. Um, it has these little radial tanks full of nitrogen for our 4 RCS thrusters that are made for control, and this is our ullage motors. Um, I felt like RCS was better for ullage than the Separatrons, since these can be reignited, and it would just be better to start practicing with the RCS and utilizing them as my ullage motors going forward, because later versions of the AJ10 are able to be ignited multiple times. Uh, as for these other motors, I just use them because they're what I'm used to. I like to use nitrogen because it's what I'm used to, and I don't have to then unlock different versions. So if I check this, you can see some of these are very expensive. Um, I've heard that HTP is a lot better than nitrogen. It's a lot more dense, but I am just a little bit frightened, I guess, to change up what I already know works. And even though it's not quite as dense and I probably don't get as much usage out of it, the nitrogen, it's just, as I said, it works for me. Underneath the third stage, we have our second stage, which is this little stack here. This, if I'm not mistaken, can carry up to 20 tons. The total stack weight is 4.35 tons. And the reason that I have it set to 20 tons is because I think, as I remember in the previous episodes, I discussed tooling for probe cores. It can be quite expensive. So I future proof essentially my second stage here and have it tooled up for the Kuruk 2 as it comes online. Um, this uses the 4 AJ10 engines, and they're very useful because they all have gimbal. We have these, I think, 8 Yolage motors here, and those are used to get this stage moving um, and settle the fuel at the bottom of the tank. This uses a stringer tank. As I said, we had it unlocked by the time the Kuruk was designed. And then we're going to go down to the last and final stage here. And this is the main booster stage of the Kuruk 1. It utilizes an avionics core that's able to lift 200 tons and control it. Again, future proofing the rocket, because even though this weighs only 165 tons, I wanted to be able to strap on solid rocket motors, increase the size of the second stage, increase the size of the third stage, and so on and so forth. And all said and done, hopefully by the end, my total weight of the stack would be approximately 200 tons or less. Um, if we scroll down here and take off our launch tower, you can see that this booster is powered by 4 LR89 NA3 engines. This is the standard LR89. This is the one that you first get after you get out of the LR43 area. And I have not picked the upgrades for those quite yet. Even though I could, I definitely just kept the original one, and I wanted to do that to simplify the costs of um, purchasing new rocket engines. And since this booster is not really going that far into the upper atmosphere, I allowed it to just use these LR89s instead of the LR105s, which are more vacuum optimized, but they have a lot less thrust. This is all on top of a modular mount, which is pretty amazing for uh, creating a nice, appealing booster base, and it makes the engines look like they're supposed to be there a little bit more. And this is my first rocket, I believe, that has a fully exposed engine area. And I think going forward, I'll probably do the same, even though it does make the rocket look a little bit more flimsy and fragile. But I suppose that'll be fine. Most rockets seem to fly with exposed engines, anyways, or exposed engine bells, at least. And as for the tank, we have the balloon tank. This was the big upgrade, and this changed a lot. Uh, we went from maybe like 90% utilization to 100% utilization, and it is way lighter than any other tanks that we have previously used. Let's see if I can pull out a conventional structure tank here. Stick it to the side. Let's go with what did the 3 meters by 20 meters. If I did the aluminum stringer tank, this would weigh 7.3 tons dry, and this weighs 2.12 tons dry. That's a huge difference, and it definitely affects the delta V of the rocket stack by a lot. Um, and I think I'm most impressed with the results. But this is our Kuruk 1 launch vehicle. It's capable of lifting around 1 ton into orbit. Uh, and you won't be able to ever tell that because these two stacks here get blended together, and they kind of they don't show the full delta V readout. So I figured that out through testing. I put a little lead ballast stack on top, and kept launching until I had a good orbit around 250 kilometers altitude. And that will be the last craft for 1958. I know it's getting a little bit, um, I guess, boring. maybe I'm not sure if that's the right word. In the series, we seem to be launching less and less every year, and that is not my intention. It's something that will continue, though, unfortunately, all the way up until 1961 when we start to actually pick up the launch cadence again. It's just building the Kuruk 1. Unfortunately, I did not start early enough. I did not start unlocking parts quick enough, and I went nearly over budget on the light satellites, so I was strapped for cash, and I really was only able to unlock the Kuruk 1 because I picked up the Lunar Probes program, which is just like heavy sats, which I should have grabbed at the beginning, anyways. But it's just like heavy satellites where it gives you constant funding all the way straight through the program. And it really has been my lifeline through these last 3 episodes that I've recorded, and it's kept the program afloat. But for the other two, the early Earth observation and the early commercial applications, those are more of a parabolic curve in terms of their funding levels. So I had to essentially wait because the other two programs didn't fund me very much early on, and I was living off of the lunar exploration funds, and I had to use those to unlock parts one at a time for the Kuruk 1 launch vehicle. Obviously, I had the AJ-10s unlocked because I used them for the Hote 600 booster. Uh, but the LR-89s, I believe I needed to fully unlock, and I needed to tool the balloon tank and unlock it, and I needed to tool the probe cores and unlock them, and the fairing, surprisingly, was very expensive to tool, um, nearly $30,000, I believe, and I was strapped for cash, as it were. So, I think going forward, I struggle a lot with cash, and you'll see, I guess, in the next couple episodes, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it does seem like the launch cadence does go down um, because we're launching a lot of very expensive things and we're still unlocking a lot of parts. So I apologize for that, I guess, in advance, and I apologize also here for this ramble at the very end. It's hard to collect my thoughts as I'm trying to think about what to say next. But if you enjoyed this episode of the Aurora Space Program Extras, I hope that you will leave a comment and let me know what you think about all these crafts. Let me know what you think about the Kuruk 1 launch vehicle. It's going to be a mainstay, really, going forward in the series. The Kuruk family of launch vehicles is basically going to bring us all the way up to the moon in the early days, and after that, in the moon to the moon for probes. That is not crewed, probably, and eventually our crewed launch vehicle will have a different name, but for now, this is my medium lift vehicle, capable of probably getting between 1 to 5 tons to orbit, depending on the variant. Uh, but yeah, that's it for now. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I really do. And I will see you all in the next video.